Season 2, Episode 3, Never Neverland. This podcast reflects personal memories, interpretations, and opinions. All individuals mentioned are entitled to the presumption of innocence. While every effort has been made to tell the story truthfully and factually, some details may be subjective or based on personal recollection. Listeners should approach the content as a personal narrative, not a formal or factual record. During my deposition, Darren wasn't in the room. He attended over Zoom, quietly watching from behind his screen, probably trying to read every word, every movement. But Melissa, she was right there, just a few feet away. Every time her attorney asked me a question, I answered honestly, and almost every time, Melissa would glare at me across the table and silently mouth the word liar. She didn't even try to hide it. I don't know if anyone else noticed, or maybe they just pretended not to, but I did. And in that moment, it said everything I needed to know. For Melissa, this wasn't about truth. It wasn't about justice. It was about control and keeping the story she'd built alive, even as it was falling apart right in front of her. Then, something unexpected happened. After one of Fettuccine's questions, one of those ridiculous ones that didn't even make sense to me, I sighed, loudly apparently. He asked if I needed a break, so I said yes. Out in the hallway, Melissa approached me and my dad. Until that moment, we really hadn't had any direct contact with her throughout the case, so it immediately felt strange. But her reason for coming over became clear fast. She wanted to talk about the trust, specifically, who was going to get Bass Lake. At first, she played emotional. She told us that she and Darren were getting divorced, that he'd been abusive, and that we had no idea what she'd been through. She said Darren was going to financially ruin her and leave her with nothing, and that all she wanted was to have somewhere to live, somewhere like Bass Lake. I'll admit it, she tugged at my heart a little. I'd been close with her once, and seeing her like that was hard. But then reality started to catch up. Melissa wasn't struggling. She was currently living in a $10,000 a month high-rise apartment and driving a brand new $200,000 Range Rover. So when she told us that she might be left with nothing, it all started to sound a little relative. I did think for a moment that maybe she was going to make things right, to realize the damage that she was causing. She was putting her father, her sister, her brother-in-law, and even me through emotional hell. All for things that Chet had already made clear he didn't want to give to her. But then, after her heartfelt sob story, her tone shifted completely. She looked at us and said, almost casually, quote, "I just want to see this through and see where it goes," end quote. Like she wasn't destroying people's lives in the process. She continued on and kept talking about how she had had no one to support her, that she had been alone for a long time, until Fettuccine chimed in with this awkward comment. He said, "She hasn't been totally alone." It caught me off guard. It felt gross. Later, as we were leaving, Melissa reminded Fettuccine that her suitcase was still in his car and that she needed to grab it from him. Between that and his earlier comment, it felt like they were admitting something. Maybe more than a professional relationship, which was strange considering Fettuccine is married. Whether something was going on or not, their behavior that day sure didn't look good. Looking back now, I realize why so many of Fettuccine's questions seem random and out of place during those depositions. They were all built on lies fed to him by Melissa and Darren. It also explains why he looked so shocked whenever our answers didn't line up with what he expected. He wasn't exposing lies that day. He was repeating the ones that he was told. I've mentioned this before, but one of the most important moments in all of this for me was when I finally got to see the body cam footage from the day the Ventura County Sheriff went to talk to Chet about the money that Melissa had stolen. For years, there had been this rumor that my parents somehow forced Chet and Lois's opinions or had undue influence over them. But when that video was recorded, my parents weren't even in California. They were on a cruise to Hawaii. That same week was when Darren returned the trust documents, the moment Chet and Lois actually saw what the trust said for the first time. So the idea that my parents somehow influenced their reaction is impossible. They were literally at sea, completely unreachable. No phone service, no ports, no way to contact anyone really. When I look back on all the questions Fettuccine asked during those depositions, I can't help but wonder if he too was just another victim of the lies. On May 24th, 2024, Fettuccine filed a substitution of attorney for Darren and Melissa, meaning he was no longer representing them. I don't know why. Maybe he finally saw through the lies. Maybe he realized the case didn't hold up once the truth started surfacing. Or maybe Darren and Melissa fired him because the lawsuit was falling apart. I'll probably never know the real reason, but one thing feels certain. It's no coincidence that his withdrawal came shortly after our depositions, especially my dad's, because by then, the cracks in their story weren't just showing, they were splitting wide open. October 10th, 2024. This day still stands out as one of the shadiest things I have ever seen. Melissa had a new attorney by then. Her name is Mary Kay. Yes, that's actually her name. And she arranged a meeting at Chet's house with his attorney. The supposed goal was to see if Melissa and Chet could come to an agreement. But that didn't make sense. Why would Melissa, who was suing me, my parents, and my Aunt Wendy, but technically not her father, be meeting privately with him? That day, my nephew Max was staying with Chet for a few weeks, and I'd stop by to see him. Chet had asked me to bring over a small voice recorder, just in case they tried to manipulate or pressure him. We never ended up using it because they refused to let him record. When Chet mentioned wanting to use the voice recorder so he could better hear the discussion later, they flat out refused. That alone raised red flags. Melissa and her attorney didn't want anything on record. When Melissa, Mary Kay, and Chet's attorney arrived, they immediately seemed irritated that Max and I were there. They didn't want us anywhere near them. They wanted us out of earshot. They didn't want anyone hearing what was said. Max and I went down the hallway to give them space, but I stayed alert. Chet still wanted me close. I noticed that the attorneys stepped outside to talk privately, leaving Melissa alone inside with Chet. On their way outside, Melissa warned them that there were cameras outside and Alexa devices inside that can grab audio. And she was right. Every camera at that house records both video and audio. Some of what they caught that day, well, it's hard to even believe, but I was able to recover some of it, and I still have it. When the attorney stepped outside, I heard the front door shake, so I stepped out of the room where I was to go see if Chet was okay. Melissa and Chet were talking alone, so everything seemed fine. So I just stayed in the office. At first, things seemed civil. Chet, as always, was kind. He started reminiscing about Lois and got emotional remembering her. But Melissa quickly turned the conversation towards herself. She told him that when Chet bought this house, they did it because she was born. It was a strange, out of context, self-centered comment, and it set the tone. What started as small talk quickly turned tense. Chet told Melissa he wanted everyone to have a good life. Her, Kathy, Wendy, all of us. He even brought up something painful, that Jared had told him he blamed Darren for his father's death. That when Scott was in trouble, Darren refused to let Chet help him, and it cost him everything. Melissa refused that narrative and said that she just spoke with Jared and he doesn't think that, and wasn't mad at them at all. While Melissa was saying that, she was probably forgetting about Jared's public Facebook post to have people call Adult Protective Services to turn Darren and Melissa in for abusing Chet and Lois. Then the conversation shifted, back to what she wanted to talk about, of course. Melissa told Chet that Darren had signed the Bass Lake house over to her, but she needed to refinance the remaining $228,000 that was still remaining on the loan into her name. She claimed she couldn't afford the payments, around $3,100 a month, and that Darren had financially ruined her. Quick sidebar. At today's rates, that mortgage would be more around $1,566 with principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. But her $10,000 a month apartment was apparently reasonable. She then said their divorce would leave her with only $400,000 to live on after 25 years of marriage, and that once her support ran out, she'd have to get a job. Melissa told Chet that in 2026, when Darren turned 65, he would be in a protected class, and he wouldn't have to pay her any more at all. Besides the fact that that is dumb and not true, Chet pointed out that he is also over 65, so why should he have to pay Melissa anything? Of course, that fell on deaf ears. Throughout all of this, Chet listened quietly at first, but when Melissa kept blaming everyone else, Darren, me, anyone but herself, he finally spoke up. He told her that he was pursuing legal action against Darren and Westcom because the money had been stolen from his accounts at Westcom. Darren was the fiduciary, and Westcom seems to be protecting Darren. We know for a fact that the sheriff's department spoke with the Westcom fraud analysts, that they had the sheriff's department file paperwork with their legal team, which they did. But what happened to any of that? Of course, Melissa immediately denied all of it, insisting Darren hadn't taken anything. She said Chet had willingly transferred the money. Chet pushed back hard. He said he hadn't. He hadn't authorized anything or completed any of those transfers, that she did it. That's when the conversation turned ugly. Chet called out her dishonesty, and Melissa fought back by gaslighting him, saying his memory was failing, that he didn't remember what really happened. She said, "Unfortunately for you, it's just not true, and you don't remember." Chet reminded her that he had just been tested by his neurologist and that his memory was fine. She cut him off again, saying, "You're under the influence of other people telling you what happened." She told him Westcom would stand by her version of events and that none of this would help him. Then, oddly, she pivoted, bringing up Alexis and claiming that the money Chet gave her back then was to help with Alexis's supposed mental illness and to pay for psychological evaluations. I have a copy of those, as we've spoken about, and they don't favor Melissa. Melissa then said that Alexis had almost killed her son and that she basically saved him. Now, we've seen the truth behind that case, yet she's still pushing her own narrative here. Melissa said that Chet told her that she didn't have to pay any of that money back. She even said that she tried to, that she wanted to, but Chet refused the money. When Chet pushed back on that, saying she was lying, she doubled down, saying that she had people who would testify against him. But Chet didn't care who she had to testify. The truth will prevail. At one point, she said, "I didn't steal from you. I was joint on that account. I had rights to it. I had rights to use that money." So she admits that she took it. I mean, we saw the proof anyway, but now I heard her say it. Then Chet, obviously frustrated, replied, "The problem is you left me destitute." Melissa shot back, "I didn't leave you destitute. The LeClairs did." Chet's reply was hilarious. He said, "You're in Never Never Land, Melissa." Chet told her that he had reached out to my parents and me, and that we had helped him, not influenced him, but helped him. Melissa denied all that and said that we just messed with his head, that everything we told him was made up. Chet told her that she was being dishonest, and she replied coldly, and I will never forgive her for saying this. She said to Chet, "My mom is disappointed in you." That line was unnecessary and evil. I heard her say it, and the cameras caught it too. And then came another disturbing part of the conversation. The moment Melissa stopped pretending to reason with Chet and started trying to rewrite reality. She asked him, "Do you actually remember who I am? Do you remember your daughter? Or is it some convoluted version that EJ has taught you about me?" Sorry, sweetie. Until you betrayed your family, I never talked about you at all. And now you write your own convoluted story. But to be fair, I talk about you now on this podcast. She didn't stop there, though. She kept going. "You are under the influence of them, and you treat us all like crap." It was heartbreaking to hear her say this. Instead of taking responsibility for anything she'd done, she then attacked his faith, telling them that his understanding of the Bible was wrong and that he was under the influence. Then she said, "Undue influence. It's criminal, and they are going to hell for it. They don't believe in God anyway, so it doesn't matter." Hearing her twist religion into a weapon against her father, accusing him and us of being damned, showed just how far gone she really was. This wasn't a daughter trying to make peace. It was someone trying to convince her father that lies were truth and that faith itself was on her side. From there, it spiraled even more. Melissa told Chet that he was anti-God and that his understanding of faith was wrong and that we, my family, were going to hell again. Chet fired back. "No, you're going to hell for this." He stood up for himself and said, "Let's cut the bullshit." He then asked Melissa if she'd brought back any of the things that she had taken from him. Melissa snapped back and said that we had actually stolen Lois's wedding ring. But then she quickly changed her story, saying that Lois actually gave her the ring, that it was written down and videotaped by Lois that it was for Melissa, and that he couldn't have it back because she gave it to her. Melissa multiple times has said that she didn't have the ring, even under oath. But under pressure, she cracked and admitted she has it. Chet then asked about getting his guns back from Darren, and she said that Darren had been told by the Ventura County Sheriff's Department to not return them unless they got a court order. That never actually happened. Finally done with the conversation, Chet said, "Your character is very disappointing." Melissa fires back, "You're a liar." The entire exchange was emotionally exhausting to listen to, like watching someone argue with a mirror that keeps changing its reflection. At one point in the conversation, Melissa tried to flip the narrative again. She told Chet that he didn't really know anything about her now, that he'd been misled, and that she actually lived down the street, just 10 minutes away from his house. That caught Chet's attention because even after everything, he still cares. He asked where she lived, wanting to reconnect in some small way. Melissa said she lived down the road, that she visited her mom's grave every day. That made Chet happy for a moment. He softened, genuinely happy to hear that she was close by and still visiting Lois. He asked gently, "What part of Canaan do you live off of?" But then the attorneys came back into the room and everything shifted. Whatever calm there had been was gone in an instant. Melissa saw them and immediately switched gears. Her tone sharpened, her attitude changed, and she slipped straight back into performance mode. Her voice cut through the room. "Why would I tell you that when you think I'm such a terrible person?" she said. Chet stayed calm. His response was quiet but steady. "Because I'm your father." And then, without warning, Melissa threw out one of the strangest things I've ever heard. She said, "Right, so you can send those people after me?" Chet told her simply that he'd never do something like that. But Melissa kept going, claiming, but he just said that, and that he doesn't remember, and he had been so rude to her, twisting the conversation into something that made no sense and didn't actually happen. Chet didn't argue. He just told her that if anyone ever came after her, he'd stand in front of her to protect her. That left me so angry to hear Melissa try to discredit her father in front of the attorneys. She did this purposefully as a tactic. It was so dirty. Eventually, Chet's attorney came up and asked me and Max to leave, claiming that was actually at Chet's request. As we left, Melissa mentioned that her devices, the same ones that she used to drop in on her mother, listen remotely. I tried to tell her those same devices were still active and I could hear everything she said, but she cut me off before I could speak and told me that question wasn't for me. It was for her father. Later, when I checked the cameras, I heard Chet's own attorney outside saying things that didn't sound like someone who had Chet's best interest at heart. That so-called meeting wasn't about peace or reconciliation. It was about pressure to end it. Because the real reason that Melissa and her attorney were there that day was to convince Chet to sign over his share of the Bass Lake house to Melissa, to get Melissa to drop the lawsuit against me, my parents, and Wendy. That's not negotiation. That's coercion. And in California, when you use a lawsuit to pressure an elderly person into giving up property they don't owe you, it's not just unethical, it's illegal. It falls under civil extortion and elder financial abuse. And if an attorney was part of the conversation, that's an ethics violation, plain and simple. Don't worry, Chet saw through all of it. And not long after that meeting, he got rid of that attorney. That day at Chet's house was more than just another argument. It was the moment that everything became even more clear. Melissa wasn't there to make peace. She wasn't there to reconnect with her father or find closure. She was there to take, to manipulate, to twist emotions, to pressure an old man into giving her what she couldn't win honestly. And as painful as it was to watch, it revealed everything about how she operated. The charm, the tears, the guilt, all of it was strategy. Because when control starts to slip, people like Melissa don't reflect. They double down. But here's the thing about the truth. It doesn't need a strategy. It doesn't need a performance. Truth just is. That afternoon, Chet didn't fall for it. He saw through the lies, through the guilt, through the manipulation. For the first time, I think he finally understood just how deep it went and how far Melissa and Darren were willing to go. In the end, she didn't get Bass Lake. She didn't get put back in the trust, and she didn't earn back her father's trust. And maybe that's what this story has always been about. Trust. Once it's broken, you can't buy it back. You can't sue for it. You can't manipulate your way into earning it again. Because when the dust settles and the lawyers are gone, all that's left are the people who stood for what was right, and those who got caught standing in their own lies. Thank you for listening to the Spencer Files. In every family, there's a story that someone doesn't want told, and this is theirs. Till next time.